You are what you wear. Not in the traditional sense of designer clothing. Perhaps instead of you are what you wear, I should say you are closest to who you wear. The closest true self is the ego of what you pretend to be, the persona with which you identify, the roles and labels you adopt, you repeat, and reinforce, the lens of which you view the world, and the way you are pushed and pulled in regards to it. The ego you cling to is made up of values and their labels. These labels are meant to say, this is how it has been and how it might be, not this is what will be. They are descriptive, not prescriptive. A prescriptive label limits one's ability to grow or adapt. If you see yourself as only A, it will be significantly harder to act as B or C. The more you present and communicate A, the harder it will be for others to see otherwise as well. This is where that entire fake it till you make it shtick comes into play. If you struggle with prescriptivist beliefs or issues, then dress well. Wear the ego you want until you become the ego you want. Wear that. Wear yourself. Be yourself. We're not sponsored by a clothing brand. The point is, if someone says, I'm not that kind of person, they're likely communicating one of two things. They're communicating that they historically haven't chosen to react in that manner, so they don't think they would react in that manner, or they don't think it's very likely they will. Or they're communicating that they lack the awareness that there is no fixed essence of a person's for there to be that sort of self-knowledge about. So it is at this point where it stops being you wearing the ego and more about the ego wearing you. So I've written and spoke on this before, but you can't escape a system by denying the system exists or denying the value of the system. Once you're aware of a system, you're forever trapped within the perspective of a relation to that system. In this way, you have an ego, there will always be an ego, even if the ego is simply, I am one without an ego. There is an upset that often occurs when there's a misalignment with expectations versus reality. This can be others viewing you as a persona, or you viewing yourself or others as some persona, and then that relevant subject not acting in accordance with said persona. So if you remember this thing we used to have called movies, you may remember some actor saying something along the lines of, I thought you were better than that, which is just communicating I expected you to act differently because I thought your values were more in line with my values, and therefore they're like condescending other values that turns out the other person doesn't have, and they're disappointed by that misalignment with reality. Some stupid fucking loser egghead suggested that the focus should be on becoming rather than on being. But they're a stupid fucking loser egghead, so who cares? Let's instead examine the words of Tezzeret. Tezzeret says, I am not a name and no word truly names me. Who I am is a fluid concept. I am no label and nothing truly labels me. The word truly does all the heavy lifting in that portion, but the concept of definitely not prescriptive, because none of these labels perfectly map onto reality, is very apparent. A name is what we shall be referred to, and for legal purposes, it is an identifier, but it conveys absolutely nothing further. For there is always more in an ego than the labels applied to it. The nuance is infinite, but the expression of nuance isn't. Next, there is who I am as a fluid concept. And oh boy, if this is one of the best sentences I've ever read in my fucking life. It does not require growth, but it allows for growth. It not only allows for growth, but allows for growth between moments. So, what do you do about all this? How do you maintain a perspective, a descriptive? How do you allow for growth for yourself and for others? How do you prevent yourself from falling into delusions of like permanence and certainties and absolutes? Some things you could do is you could practice linguistic awareness. So when you catch yourself making claims about who you or others are, you can pause and correct and shift the language. So instead of saying like, I am X, you can say in the past, I X. Instead of saying like, oh, they're not the type to, you can say they often. Another thing is you practice awareness of expectations. So you can examine like, how do you expect someone to act? But how would you expect them to act if you didn't have a persona in your head of their internal circumstances that you don't have access to? You only have access to interpretations of it. You should also allow for space for your expectations to be contradicted, and examine what about your expectation has misaligned with reality and why. You can practice awareness of your own feelings, so you experience the stimuli, you pause, you identify them, and then you can put down your persona, and you can just exist with your emotions, and then decide what you want to do about them. Not what you would or should do, but what you will do. And it's important to remember that when others accuse you of contradictions because there's some nuance that they don't have, Walt Whitman has already given us the biggest go fuck yourself response in existence to this criticism. He said, do I contradict myself? Very well, then I contradict myself. I am large, I contain multitudes. But ultimately, you are what you wear. But if you never remember to take it off, you might forget that it's optional to wear it all along.